let's get started. So from today onwards, classes are just gonna be like 10 to 15 minutes, just shorter on average, just because we've gone through like most of the fundamentals already, and it's gonna be more coding oriented from now on. And we're just gonna have like small, just a few slides every in the beginning, just for the coding of that day. So today, just open up JGrasp and continue from. We're gonna continue from where we left off last time. And before that, we have to go through just a few short slides on user input with scanner. All right, cool. So basically, we have something called user input where you can interact with your own computer program in a way where you can read input from what you call the console. And the console is just where, while the program runs, it can ask the user to type input. So that's pretty much where it shows whether you have an error or not, or where it gives you the green, the program has been run, that type of signal. So that's what you call the console, and inside the console it'll ask you for your input, and that input will typically be stored by the user in variables in the code. And the user input can be tricky because users are unpredictable and misbehave. So they might not obviously put down the right input that you want them to put in your program. So you might have to put some additional guards and constraints in terms of what they can type into the user input. But usually interactive programs have more interesting behavior because user input is able to guide the, the program the program's functionality. So in order to do user input, we use what we call a scanner, and there are many more other more advanced ways of user input. One is buffered reader, which is much more advanced than scanner, and this is usually used like for computing when you have to digest like a lot of data from a file, lots of user input data. But for now, we're going to stick with scanner, which is a little bit more basic and more used in terms of user input. So what a scanner is a scanner is an object just like string. So just like how we saw string was an object, and in JGraph we were creating our own class, our own objects. Like that, scanner is also an object, and this object can read input from many sources. Right? And this scanner also communicates with system.in. And last time I briefly touched that system is also an object, and we don't have to worry about .in yet. All you have to know is system.in is basically the way that you can write input, and the way that the computer can read this input. So it's basically the opposite of system.out. Instead of computer printing out um, or computer outputting something, the computer wants to take an input. And scanner can also be used to read from files, websites, and databases, which as you get more advanced, become more useful. So as with anything, we want to look at the syntax whenever we initialize scanner. The scanner class is going to be found in the java.util package. So what that means is every time you have to use it, you would have to do a statement called import. And this is a keyword in Java. Anytime you have to use any type of package in Java, you have to use the keyword import, and you would have to do import java.util and then the specific package from, or the specific class or object that you want from the java.util package. In this case, it's scanner. So you'd have to do import java.util.scanner and then use semicolon and end the statement. So when you have to construct a scanner object to read console input, the syntax for this is going to be the same, but almost the same as something like string. So for a string, you would have to do string a equals. And for every object, we discussed this last time, you would have to use the new keyword, new. Then for string, you could do something like new string, and then create an object. But for a string, we know we can also just do the double quotes and say something like a here, right? And we could do the exact same thing, string a, like this. Both of these would work for a string, but typically for any other object that either vCreate or vInitialize, we would need something called new, and then we would have to call it. You would have to call the constructor of the string class, and the string class in Java is something that's already pre-built. So last time we looked at bank account, and we had to do something called new bank account, and that would call our bank account constructor. Just a bit of recap from last time. Um, Last time we had bank account, and we initialized its constructor, and we called its constructor when we had to initialize the bank account object. Right. So in a similar way, you would do the same thing for scanner. You would create scanner. You would have to say the type or scanner, and then whatever name you want it to be. So in this case, you have to call it console because it reads from the console. You can call it scanner console. You would have to use the new keyword again, and then you would have to call the constructor of the scanner class. The constructor of a scanner class takes in a parameter. And we saw last time that our constructor also took 4 parameters, so we had to pass in those values here. So in the scanner constructor, we have to actually pass in a value, and the scanner class is not really expecting a numerical value. It's expecting this whole object called system.in, so it's expecting this input field. You can think about it like an input field, like a Google search bar. It's expecting that whole search bar inside here, right? And so this is how you initialize it. Scanner console equals new scanner inside system.in, right? And and just like any other class, a scanner is also going to have methods which outline its functionalities, right? So every class, our bank account has functionality for you to deposit money, for you to withdraw money, for you to store your address, get your address, all those type of things. The same way, the scanner methods are going to have functionality built into them to read and analyze input or user input, right? So we have these 4 very common methods for a scanner, and this method nextInt is going to basically just read an int from the user and return it, right? And the next double method is going to read a double from the user, and we don't really have to worry about returning it for now. We can just focus on the fact that it can just read an int or read a double, and next can read one word. So a word like bag, right? So if you enter bag of clothes into the console, it's going to be able to read bag, just bag, right? However, if you enter bag of clothes into just one singular line, like bag of clothes, then we could use the next line method, and it's going to be able to read this whole line. Alright, so each method is going to wait until the user presses enter. The value typed by the user is returned. So essentially what you could do is you could first give out a prompt. So you output the prompt. You print out how old are you. So you ask the user, how old are you, right? And then you create a int age. So you create in memory this age variable, and this is going to store whatever is returned by um, whatever is returned by the next int method, right? So you use console.nextInt because remember we previously defined console, we initialized it, so console is ready to use. So we use console.nextInt. This will make more sense as we do it in the actual code today. So we use console.nextInt, and this nextInt is going to be able to read whatever integer or whatever number that you type in, and it's going to store whatever number you type into the computer into this age. So if you type 70, right, it's going to be able to store 70 into this integer age, and once this 70 gets stored in here, then it's going to be able to proceed to this line where it's going to be able to print out, it'll print out this command, you typed 70 as an output. And this top line is what you call a prompt, which is a message telling the user what input to type. Alright. So let's take a look at a small example. So we have a class defined, we have the main method, which we know is where all the code is run. And then we create the console object of scanner. So the scanner object is going to be named console, which is the conventional name for it. People also name it scanner itself because it can scan files. So both of these names are conventional for the scanner object. And as a parameter, it takes in the system.in object, which is basically just the input functionality. And once this happens, you can create your prompt. So this is the prompt right here. And the prompt asks, how old are you? Then you can store that again into age. So it creates age in memory and directly assigns it to whatever you input here. So if you had input 29, it's going to take that 29 and store it here. And here what this is doing is it's doing int years equals 65 minus age. So it's going to create another primitive type storage, years. And it's going to store 65 minus, and then it's going to retrieve this age of 29. So it's going to do 65 minus 29, right? And which is 36. So it's going to store 36 into years, right? And once this years gets 36, it's going to print years plus, and for now we don't really have to know any of the string concatenation stuff, but it's going to print years plus years to retirement, which just means it's going to print out this 36. And we can ignore this and it'll just be printing out 36, which is the years it would take for a 29-year-old, which is what you entered that you are, to retire. And this is how it's going to look in the console. It's going to show how old are you. It's going to prompt that because you specifically printed it out. And you're going to enter 36. And you will be entering 36 here. And this will be in this is going to be specifically your user input, so you would have to specifically type out 29 here, and then it'll be then in the next line, once you click 29 enter, it's going to output 36 years until retirement. Alright. Okay. So with the scanner, it's very important to understand input tokens. So token is a unit of user input. So just like how we have units for everything else, like distance, uh, mass, like kilograms, meters, centimeters, a token is basically a unit of user input that the scanner uses, right? So tokens are separated by white spaces, which are either spaces, tabs, or new lines, right? So if you were to see how many tokens appear on the following line of input, well, assuming that here I think we have two spaces, one, two, three spaces. So we have two, three, one, two spaces, one space, and I believe the three spaces here is actually one tab. We have two spaces. Um, um, Two more spaces. Yeah, and then we don't count whatever's inside this double quotes because this is a string. Alright, so it should be the way you calculate, you can pretty much assume that these are all just one white space. So you could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the amount of spaces doesn't really matter. It's still going to end the token here, 23, then John Smith, then 42.0, and so on and so forth. Right. So essentially, you can say that it's one token, two tokens, three tokens, 4, 5, 6, right? This whole thing, this whole thing, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So you could say 6 tokens. And whenever a token is not what you ask it for, the scanner is going to crash, right? So because you're expecting this age as an integer, you would have to use .nextInt, right? And because you're using .nextInt, the console is expecting you to enter a number that can be stored. So if you say, what is your age, and you write something like Timmy, so you write like a name or a string, well, a string can't be stored into, a string is an object, so it can't be stored into a primitive like an int, right? And it violates the functionality of the .nextInt. You would have to use .next or .nextLine if you want to expect this, right? So it's going to give you what you call a input mismatch exception, and it's just good to be aware of all of these exceptions or errors. All right. So we have one more final example. Yeah. So just this example and one more here. So if you go through this quickly, it's basically just, again, we create this, we ask for the prompt, we want to store two numbers by asking the user. So num1, we want to ask the user, num2, we want to ask the user for an integer. We want to calculate the product of those two numbers by multiplying it and storing it into another integer called product. And then we want to print what the product is, right? So it says please type two numbers, and essentially we would have to type this with a space, so we know that it's two numbers and it takes in two separate tokens. So this is going to take in token 1, this is going to take in token 2, the way it works. So 8 space 6, enter, and then it's going to say the product is 48 because 6 times, or 8 times 6 is 48. The same thing here, please type two numbers, 8 space 6, enter, product is 48. Okay. So here they're using the scanner's .next method. So the same thing here, initialize, prompt, store the user input, as a string because we're using the dot next. So what is your name? Chelsea, right? So you type in your name, Chelsea, right? And it's going to store that into a variable called name, and it's going to output your name as Chelsea. And if you type in something like Chelsea and then you type in like another name like Jack, like space Jack, it's only going to take in the very first one because it's a console dot next, not next line. Next line would take in a whole line. Next is only going to take in one token. And since you separated it, it's only going to take in Chelsea, right? And that's what the next line method reads a line of input as a string. So if you want to ask what is your address, and then there's a prompt, you want to store it into a string, you want to store the address as a string. So use console.nextLine because an address is usually multiple tokens. It's going to be a full line of address, right? And once the user says something like 123 Fake Street, it's going to be able to store this whole thing as one string address, and it's going to output your address is 123 Fake Street. Alright, and here's some extra information about user input and scanner. So yeah, here it's essentially it's made out of tokens divided by spaces and lines which are divided by new line characters. So next line is going to basically look at, the next line won't be looking at spaces, it's going to ignore spaces as so if you do something like dot next line, you do something 123 space fake space st dot, it's going to ignore these aren't its tokens, but here once you enter this, Java is going to put in a token called /n, which represents new line. So when it encounters this, it understands that, okay, well after this is one full line, right? So whenever you click enter, Java inserts this new line token, and it understands that one line ends here, and then it's going to recognize this whole thing as one token. All right. So if you were to type something like this, the buffer is going to be containing, if you have to use spaces, all of these things. This is going to be a new line token, and here it's detailing various scanner methods again. And here, instead of console, they're just calling it scan. And then let's just briefly go over oh, sorry. Let's just briefly go over the math and random classes. So there's something called a math class in Java that just lets you do some more advanced math operations. So you could do something like math.absolute value, math.sine, math.cosine, math.tan. These are all for triangles. And math.pow for exponents. And math.random to get a random value from 0.0 all the way to 0.999. So it'll give you random decimal values like 0.512, 0.32, all of these decimal values. Mat.min is going to find the minimum between two values. Mat.max is going to find the maximum between two values. So you don't really have to know all of these memorized or anything. Just know this, know to refer back to this and know that the math class exists with math methods. Similarly, there's also a random class which lets you do a lot of random um, number generations. So this would give you a random integer value, this would give you a random double value, this would give a this would give you a random boolean value, so random true or false, right? So this is just there in the slides also. I'll be sharing this by the end of today. Alright. So leave. Now we're going to be jumping into wherever we left off yesterday. Right. Alright. So here's where we left off yesterday. So yeah, so yesterday we created, just to recap, we decided all the attributes and properties we're going to need. We also decided all of the methods that we would need to fulfill those functionalities, and we successfully created this constructor here. So this is the constructor. Okay, and those are the private instance variables. And this is our client class, or the main class, that has the main method, which is the thing that's actually going to run. And just to recap, we have this bank account class, and we initialize it with new bank account, and all these values that we pass into this are our own values that we just made up here as a string. And bankaccount.java takes in 4 different strings. The first one is going to be the address, then the currency, then the name, then the type, and all of this is getting stored internally into this instance of a class. So essentially, bank account is going to point, we discussed this all last time, but it's going to point to a reference of this bank account object that contains this instance of this class template that we've created here. Right, and we are storing some default variables also. So money equals 1,000. Every bank account is starting at 1,000, whatever it could be, dollars, we could say. And every bank account, when you create it, is set to active. And of course, year since started is set to 0. Okay, and we know that we have to put the this keyword because, well, this address and this address have the same name. So if you have to access this one specifically, so we want to store this address into that address, right? We would have to use this dot address equals address. So that would mean that this address here is getting this one from the constructor parameter. And you can see again we use a new keyword, and we would have to, and this is essentially the same format as the constructor. So for every object, it's going to have a new, and you would have to call bank account again, new bank account, and follow whatever format is required by the constructor. And then what we did was we have one method. So we have all the methods. We're gonna create all the, we've only done one from last time, and this is the get address method. And what this does is it returns an address. So very interesting about methods that we didn't talk about last time is that a method is not just going to be like a constructor. It's not going to just be public bank account or public and then the name. It's actually going to have public string. And the reason you have the string is that whatever you want to return, you have to specify the type of thing that you're trying to return. So essentially, we're trying to return this address. That address is a string, which is why we put string here. Alright, so if you want to return something like a string, we would have to put string here. If you would have to return money, this money double, then we would have to put double here. Right, and that's basically the premise of a method. And a method can also have void. You can have void here, and a void means that you can't return anything. You're just doing things inside here. You're not returning anything, you're just doing. Alright, so instead of just methods here, I'm going to call these getter methods. And a getter method basically allows the user to get all of these values. So we did get address. So now we can do something called get currency, right? So we just go down and we do all the getter methods. And essentially getter and setter methods that I wrote right here, getter and setter methods, these should be done for almost every single private instance variable unless it's very much not necessary. So public string, you would need the get currency, right? So we would do get currency. I have to do these braces, and inside here the return keyword is just going to allow this method to return that specific value, right? So we're going to be able to return currency. And remember, because all of these parameters in the constructor, they're only defined inside this constructor. So we don't have to use this, but if you just want to specify, there's no harm in using this here again. And this is going to refer to the main private instance variables and none of this, right? So there's no harm in just putting this here, but it's not required. It would work without it too. Right, so I'm just not going to use this because it's more typing. But this address is actually referring to the main address instance variable, or this one, because this one is no longer defined anymore. It's only within the scope of these parentheses. Alright, so the same way we're going to go through everything. Name, public, string, get name, per name, and finally now we have public double get money. We can now return money. Alright, and now we have type, so public string get type. Now we can return the type. Also we have is active and years since started, so public boolean get whether bank account is active. Right. We could just say get, or we could just say we could just call this something else, like get status, get the status of the bank account. And in general, you want to keep these names very small and easy to understand, which is why I did that. So you would here you could just return is active. This would be true or false. So get status, or so get status returning true would mean that the bank account is active, and if it returns false, then the bank account is inactive. And then int years since started, so we would have to do the exact same. Public int this time, get years since started, return years since started. Alright, so now we finished all the getter methods for every variable. So now we have to move on to the setter methods. So we've defined every method that we are supposed to do here. So we need to do getter methods, setter methods, withdraw, deposit, and inactivate. Right? So now we have to do setter methods for all of them. So public. And for a setter method, all of these are going to be void because they don't have to return anything. You don't have to get information back from a setter. Public void set address. Alright. And for this, we want to take in a new address. Right? So here, whenever you call this, you want to be able to pass in. You want to get a new address so you can set this. Right? So we can say here, this is where all the parameters are. So we can take in a parameter called new address, and once we get this new address, we can do address equals new address. So essentially what this is doing is, let's say you have an old address, it's called 123 Fake Street, and now the new address that you get passed in, that one is called 234 Fake Street, and you want to update it. So this new address, the string address is going to lose this, and instead it's going to have 234 Fake Street instead stored in. So that's what it does essentially here. Right, and we go ahead and do this for everything, and the void means that we're not actually looking to return anything. And so we go ahead, do public void set currency, string new currency. We set our currency to this new currency. And now we do that for, well, you don't want to be able to set your money, right? You should be able to set your name. For money you would have to make deposits or withdrawals, right? So we would have to skip that one, but we could set our name, public void set name, string new name, name equals new name. Right, so we're gonna have to skip over money. We could set our type, and remember for inactive, for active is active, we're not going to be able to set that. It's like a one-time thing where you just inactivate it. Yeah. Or let's have it both ways. Let's create a method to inactivate and a method to activate. So we want to do that individually. So we're not going to have a setter for that. Alright, so we're going to skip money and that. So the last thing we would have to do is type. Okay. So public void set type string new type equals new type. Alright, so we could do this, and now this is pretty much all of the setter methods. And now getter methods, and the setters start here. So setter methods. Now we want to do the deposit method. Okay, so for deposit, what we would have to do is, this is going to be void because we don't want to return any, we don't want to return anything. So we just call this deposit. And for deposit, we want a deposit amount, right? So we do int deposit amount. Okay, and then what we could do is, we have this money here, right? So inside, we want to change some money, and we want to add the deposit amount. So we want to do money equals the previous amount of money that we had plus the deposit amount. So money, this money variable is going to take in its previous value plus the deposit amount and store it. Right, and remember we have a shortcut whenever you have to do something equals itself plus some amount, right? And that is, you could just use plus equals, and it's just going to accumulate this deposit amount into that money. And after we do this, we could maybe just do system.out.println you have deposited you don't have to know what this means yet. We'll get into that some other time. But just for now, deposit amount. You have deposited, yeah, dollars, deposit amount, and we could do another println. Println. And what we could do is, once that we've printed out the amount that they've deposited, we could give them their balance, right? So your new bank balance is dollars. Okay, and then remember, again, you don't have to do this type of string stuff yet. We'll get into that some other time, but just so that our output actually looks good, we could given these strings to describe it. Your new bank balance is, and essentially, because we don't really just want to print out this variable, so we don't want to say just print out what our new money is. So we don't want to do plus money here, because we have a way for us to get the money, right? So we could use this get money here, which would return the money, which is more, I guess, a more methodical way to do it, instead of just directly accessing these private variables. And it's convention to not actually, even if you are within this private scope, even within its own class, to not directly access any of these, right? So instead of this, you could just use get money. The reason this works as just, the reason you could just do get money and then these two parentheses is that here you could just copy its structure, get money like this, right? And the reason it works is because we're inside the same class, and it would only work if we're in the same class. This get money is gonna work. Alright, and let's do withdraw in a similar fashion. Withdraw method, public void withdraw, and withdraw amount. And instead of plus equals, we want to do money equals money minus withdraw amount. So we want to subtract that amount, and the shortcut for this is minus equals, and we can do system.out.println. You have withdrawn dollars plus withdraw amount. Then we want to show the balance. Your bank balance is dollars, and get money. Perfect. And now, once we do this, we finished all of those, and now all we have is inactivate and activate. Okay, so we do public void activate, and we don't want anything, we don't want any parameters here. So you can have a method that doesn't take in anything, you can just call it. And you can have something that doesn't take anything and that doesn't return anything, it just does some operation. And what this does is it changes is active, changes this to false. Okay, or sorry, it would change it to true because it's activate. And public void inactivate would do the exact opposite. It's going to take is active and change it to false because it's not active anymore. And this is activate method method. Okay, and we've basically finished off everything. We finished every single method in our bank account class. Now we can head on to main.java, and since we want to read from user input, we could do import java.util.scanner, right? And once we do this, we could create our console. So we could do scanner, and I usually just name it scanner. This is more easier. New scanner system.in, and once we create this, we can create our prompt. So imagine we want the user to control all of these values. So we can create a prompt system.out.print what is your address? And then we can take a string address, we could create that, and we could store scanner.next line, just like how we saw in the example. We could do that, and then I'm going to just copy paste this for time. And inside here, for the next question, we could ask, what is your currency? Then we could store this in a variable called currency. And now we can ask, what is your name? And we could store this into, we call it name. And for these, you could just use next, but next line also would work. And then finally, we can ask, what is type of bank account you want? Okay, and then we can just call this type. Alright, and essentially, we've made all of these user customizable. So here, all we can do is, and let me make this cleaner by putting in spaces. Yeah, okay, that was okay, and mess that up too. Oh, there we go. So we're asking 4 different questions and storing them, right? And then we're able to create this bank account with address, currency, name, and type. So we're just passing in all of these things that we normally did, but instead of us hard programming it, we're letting the user input guide that. Alright, and then now we can print out a bunch of these things, right? Like address, right? So we could get the address. We can get the money, and now we can deposit some amount of money, right? So we got the let's get the address. Let's get the name instead. Name, and get name. So we're printing these things out, and now we get the amount of money we have initially. Let's deposit some money into this bank account. The bank account is just called A for now. So A dot deposit. Let's say we want to deposit 8,000. Let's say we want to do 25.25. Or since we're only using ints, let's say we're only depositing. Let's say we're depositing 200, right? And now we can print our money again and see that if it's actually changed. Okay, and now we could do a withdraw. We withdraw and not 200. Let's withdraw a lot more. 415. Okay, and now we can check our money again. Alright, and once we do these, we can test all of our other methods out. Like we could do a dot inactivate. Okay, and then we could then print out system dot out dot println. We could do is active question mark and do a dot get status. Then we could do a dot we could set something right, we could set type to let's see, we could change, or let's set type to let's change it to stock. Then let's print that out. Bank account type. Okay. Once we do this, we can do a dot get, or yeah, get type. Alright, so now we've basically created this way of just seeing, of getting user input and then storing it into bank account, and then just trying out all our different methods and the functionalities of our bank account. So you can create more of these and experiment with all of this. I'll also share the code right after we run this and check if it works. Right, and you can try experimenting with all of these different methods that we've created, and try all this code out on your own. So let's click this compile. Oh, and already we're missing a semicolon here, so let's add that and save. Now click this compile again. So the compiled perfectly, which means there's no like spelling mistakes and syntax errors. So let's click this run button, and immediately you can see here it's asking what is your address. So in here you can type in something like 123 Fake Street. Okay, and once you type this in, you can click enter, and now it's asking what is your currency. So we can call say US dollars. Now I can click enter again. Now it's asking me what is my name, so let's just say my name is ABCD, right? So I can click that and I can click enter. What is the type of bank account you want? So let's go with our whatever we had before, federal deposit. Okay, and click enter. And now here, because the first thing we're printing out is our name, it's printing that out. Our name is ABCD. The money we have is 8,000. Okay, so, and then we're depositing oh, and actually I suppose we don't really need these because yeah, let's just rerun this again. Sorry, 123 Fake Street, US dollars, BCD, federal deposit. Okay, so since we've already used print commands in our deposit and all those methods, we don't really have to do get money and see from here whether the money has changed or not. So that's what I removed. So yeah, it's showing that our name is ABCD, which it is because we entered that here, and the money that we initially have is 8,000 because we've defined in our bank account to start off with a 1,000 and we haven't made any deposits or withdrawals. And then we've deposited 200, and it says you have deposited $200. Your new bank balance is $1,200, so 1,000 plus 200. Then it says you've withdrawn 415, and then our new bank balance is $785, right? and then we've inactivated our account, and then we get is active, false, so it's not active. Okay, and then we have our initial type was we entered federal deposit, but once we've changed it, we've set the type to stock, and then we ask for our bank account type, and we get that it is a stock now. Okay, so like this, you could maybe experiment more, and instead of depositing a fixed amount, maybe you could ask the user by using a scanner and like a system like this to ask for the user for the amount they want to deposit, which would be better, right? And because we don't have any more time today, I would let I'll let you try experimenting with user input and this bank account class. So I will be sharing the code for this. In fact, I'll do it right now in the chat. So here's main.java. Whatever I had is, I'll just put this into the chat. Right here. So all of that is main.java. Okay, and here's my bank account.java. I guess it's not letting me type out the whole thing. So, okay. Yeah, I'll just find out a really fast way of doing this. I'll just create a Google Drive folder. Sorry, give me a second. Okay, so okay, I'll be sharing this folder, and this has the two Java files, main.java and bankaccount.java. Okay. So I believe this link should take you to that folder. Let me just check. No, not that link. Ignore that one. It's gonna be the second link that I just shared right here. Okay, the second link is going to take you to the folder with the code, and let me share the slides really quickly. So